The desert wind carried whispers of the dead. Sister Sarah Brennan knelt in the red Texas dust, her torn habit catching on creosote branches. 52 years of life had taught her to read the earth like scripture, and this morning the ground spoke of violence. 8 sets of hoof prints pressed deep into the hard pan. 6 riders, 2 pack mules. The tracks were fresh, 12 hours, maybe less. Her fingers traced the edge of a print. The horse had favored its left front leg, a stone bruise perhaps, the kind of detail that would slow a man down if he pushed too hard. She'd remember that. The Winchester 1873 lay across her lap, its walnut stock worn smooth by decades of handling. Rosary beads wrapped around the trigger guard, black wood against blued steel. Sarah's hands trembled as she reached for the rifle. 15 years since she'd sworn to never touch this weapon again. "Forgive me, Father," she whispered. "I swore I'd never hold this rifle again." She pulled a cartridge from her belt. The brass gleamed in the early light. For a moment, just a heartbeat, the world flickered. Young hands loading the same bullets. Blood on her fingers. Screaming. The smell of gunpowder and death. Sarah blinked. The vision vanished. She was 52 again, alone in the West Texas wasteland, hunting the man who'd taken everything from her twice. She crossed herself and loaded the rifle. The action worked smoothly. Muscle memory never forgot, even when the soul tried to. 15 years of peace, she muttered, and he comes back. A raven circled overhead, its cry harsh against the morning silence. In the distance, maybe 10 miles southwest, a thin column of smoke rose against the pale sky. Not a brush fire. Too controlled. Too small. A camp. Sarah stood her knees, protesting. The desert stretched endlessly in all directions, mountains to the north, the Rio Grande somewhere beyond the southern haze. This was the country between laws where men like Miguel Vega thrived. She mounted her horse, a sturdy bay mare that had carried her through 8 days of pursuit. The animal's ears flicked toward the smoke. "Half-day's ride," Sarah said softly. "Maybe less if we push." The Winchester slid into the saddle scabbard. Her hand lingered on the stock. "Lord, let me save them without becoming what I was." The mare stepped forward. Behind them, 8 days of trail stretched back to El Paso. Ahead, smoke and blood in the reckoning Sarah had run from for 15 years. The wind shifted. Somewhere in the distance, she thought she heard a gunshot. Or maybe it was just memory. The chapel bell rang for morning prayers at 5:30. Sister Sarah had been awake for an hour already, hands busy with the rope mechanism that lifted the bell. The pulleys needed oil. The hemp was fraying at the third knot. Small problems, the kind she could fix with time and patience. The kind that didn't require a rifle. "You're avoiding prayers again." Sarah didn't turn. Mother Superior Beatrice's voice carried the gentle reproach of someone who'd known her for 14 years. "The bell needs maintenance, Mother. If it fails during Sunday Mass, the bell has rung for 130 years. It will ring another day." The older woman's footsteps approached. "The sisters are waiting." Sarah set down her tools. Her hands were calloused from work marked by years of fixing things that broke. Bells, wagon wheels, fence posts, everything except what mattered most. The chapel was small, built of adobe in the old Spanish style. Morning light filtered through narrow windows, casting long shadows across the wooden pews. 6 young nuns knelt in prayer, their habits dark against the whitewashed walls. Sarah took her place at the front. Her voice joined theirs in the familiar Latin. "Pater noster, qui es in caelis." She watched them as she prayed. These women who'd chosen God over the world. Sister Maria, 28, whose voice could make even the simplest hymn sound like heaven. Sister Anne, 31. Irish fire barely contained beneath her veil. Sister Catherine, the young French nurse who'd come to them last year. Sister Grace, shy and kind, who could make bread rise like nobody's business. Sister Teresa, strong as any man from years of working the garden. Sister Judith, quiet and practical, her needle as precise as a surgeon's scalpel. Children, really. The oldest was younger than Sarah had been when Thomas died. When prayers ended, Mother Superior gestured for Sarah to remain. The other nuns filed out their voices, rising in soft conversation. Something about the missionary journey to Santa Fe. Excitement in their words. Sister Sarah. Mother Superior moved to the small side chapel where a Winchester rifle hung on the wall above a bronze plaque. Donated by the Ashford family, 1881. You've been avoiding this. Sarah's jaw tightened. Guns are tools of violence, Mother, not tools of God. Yet you know how to use them. Your late husband taught you. The words hung in the air. Your late husband, as if 15 years could make Thomas anything less than present in her mind. That was another life. Sarah's voice came out harder than intended. Another woman. Mother Superior studied her with those knowing eyes. 70 years of living had made the woman difficult to deceive. The world hasn't changed, Sarah. Only you have. And sometimes, she touched the Winchester's stock. Sometimes the world demands we remember what we were. The sisters are preparing for the Santa Fe mission, Sarah said, changing the subject. I should help with the wagon. You volunteered to stay behind. Someone needs to maintain the convent. Or perhaps, Mother Superior said gently, the desert holds too many memories. Sarah had no answer for that. The truth sat between them unspoken. Yes, the desert held memories. The ranch, Thomas's grave, the places she'd hunted men and become something less than human in the process. The southern route is safe, Sarah said finally. They'll be fine. Mother Superior nodded, but the doubt flickered in her eyes. The sheriff arrived at noon, his horse lathered from hard riding. Sarah was in the courtyard helping load supplies into the mission wagon. 6 wooden crates of Bibles, medical supplies, food for the 3-day journey. Sister Maria was already planning which hymns to sing on the trail. Sister Sarah, Sheriff Coleman dismounted, his face grim beneath his wide-brimmed hat. Got word I should share. She set down the crate she'd been lifting. Something in his tone made her hands cold. Comanchero activity north of Guadalupe Pass, he said. Raiding party hit a ranch 2 days ago. Took everything that wasn't nailed down. Sister Ann, overhearing, stepped closer. The nuns are taking the southern route, Sheriff, away from Guadalupe Pass. Ma'am, with respect, he looked at Sarah. Southern route passes through the old McClintock Ranch territory. The name hit like a fist. Sarah forced her face to remain neutral. There's nothing left there but ghosts, Sheriff. That may be, but Comancheros range wide. They're desperate, trafficking people south to Chihuahua now. He lowered his voice. Women especially. Sister Teresa, who'd been tying down cargo, stopped working. Are we in danger? Not if you're careful, Coleman said. Travel during daylight. Keep to the main trail. If you see riders, hide the wagon and wait them out. He turned back to Sarah. You're not going with them. Sister Sarah is needed here, Mother Superior said, emerging from the chapel. But perhaps we should delay the journey. No, Sister Ann's voice was firm. The mission in Santa Fe is expecting us. We can't let fear dictate our service. The other nuns murmured agreement, young voices full of conviction. Sarah saw herself in them, the person she'd been at 30 before the world taught her what it truly was. Take the Winchester, Sarah said suddenly. Everyone turned to stare. Sister Sarah, Mother Superior, began. You've always said, I know what I've said. Sarah met the older woman's eyes. But the sheriff's right. They need protection. Do you know how to shoot sisters? Coleman asked. Silence. Sister Maria looked at her hands. Sister Catherine shook her head. I could teach them, Sarah heard herself say. Basic marksmanship. Enough to scare off anyone who... No. Mother Superior's voice was gentle but absolute. We are servants of God, not soldiers. If danger comes, we will trust in Providence. Sarah wanted to argue, wanted to explain that Providence didn't stop bullets, didn't prevent men like Miguel Vega from taking what they wanted. But she'd chosen this life, chosen peace over violence. Some days that choice felt like wisdom. Other days it felt like cowardice. We leave at dawn, Sister Ann announced. God will protect us. The sheriff touched his hat brim and left. Sarah watched him ride away, that cold feeling in her hands spreading to her chest. Sister Judith approached, her quiet voice barely audible. Sister Sarah, you seem troubled. Just tired, sister. But when she returned to the bell tower that evening, Sarah found herself staring at the Winchester on the chapel wall. Her hands remembered the weight of it, the way the stock fit against her shoulder, the smooth action of the lever, the kick of recoil. She turned away and prayed until her knees ached. Some memories you could bury, others just waited in the dark. The wagon left at first light, 6 nuns singing hymns as they rolled south. Sarah watched from the convent gate until they disappeared into the heat shimmer. Something in her chest pulled tight, a warning she couldn't name. She spent the day working, fixed the bell mechanism, mended a section of fence, cleaned the chapel until the adobe floors gleamed, anything to keep her hands busy and her mind quiet. But when the sun touched the western mountains and the wagon hadn't returned, she knew, 20 miles south. Sister Maria's voice carried across the Guadalupe foothills. Ave Maria, gracia plena. The hymn echoed off the rock faces, beautiful and pure. Sister Anne drove the wagon, her Irish hands confident on the reins. Sister Catherine sat beside her, eyes closed in prayer. Beautiful country, Sister Teresa murmured from the wagon bed. God's work is everywhere. Sister Grace, the youngest, pointed to a hawk circling overhead. Look how free it is. The first gunshot shattered the moment like glass. The wagon horse screamed. Sister Anne hauled on the reins as riders poured out of a canyon to their left. 8 men on horseback, faces covered with bandanas, rifles raised. Stop the wagon. The voice was accented, commanding. Alto. Sister Anne's hands froze on the reins. The wagon lurched to a halt. Around them, the riders formed a circle, cutting off any escape. One man rode forward, older than the others, maybe 50. When he pulled down his bandana, Sister Catherine gasped. A scar ran from his left temple to his jaw, an old wound that had healed badly, twisting his face into a permanent snarl. Buenas tardes, hermanas. His smile was cold. You're far from home. We're missionaries, Sister Anne said, her voice steady despite the rifle pointed at her chest. Women of God, we have nothing worth stealing. The scarred man laughed. Nothing worth stealing. Hermana, you're worth $500 each in Chihuahua. The brothels always need fresh girls. Sister Maria's hymn died in her throat. We're nuns. Sister Catherine stood, her French accent thickening with fear. You cannot. I can do whatever I want. The man gestured to his riders. Miguel Vega does not answer to God or man. 2 riders moved forward. Sister Teresa, strong from garden work, grabbed a shovel from the wagon bed and swung. The metal caught one man across the shoulder. He cursed and backhanded her. She dropped like a stone. Teresa, Sister Grace, scrambled to her fallen friend. Miguel Vega sighed. Ladies, please, don't make this difficult. He looked at the wagon driver, an old Mexican man named Paulo, who'd volunteered to help them reach Santa Fe. You old man, drive away. This doesn't concern you. Paulo's weathered hands trembled on the reins. Por favor, señor. They are women of the church, Miguel shot him. The sound was deafening in the close canyon. Paulo's body toppled from the driver's seat and hit the ground with a sound that would haunt Sister Maria's dreams for years. Anyone else want to be heroic? Miguel's voice was conversational. No good. Tie them up. We ride before dark. The Comancheros moved with practiced efficiency, ropes around wrists. The nuns pulled from the wagon and placed on horses, hands bound to saddle horns. Sister Teresa was unconscious, draped over a mule. Sister Judith was crying silently. Sister Anne kept trying to speak, and one of the men gagged her. Miguel circled the wagon, examining their supplies. He picked up a wooden crucifix from Sister Catherine's belongings, studying it in the fading light. St. Catherine Convent, he read from the inscription. El Paso, Sister Maria, her Spanish better than the others, answered before she could stop herself. Yes, senor. Miguel's scarred face split into a grin. El Paso, I know that place. He looked at her with sudden interest. Tell me, sister, is there a woman there named Sarah McClintock? Sister Maria's blood ran cold. Sister Sarah never spoke of her past, but there were rumors, whispers of a life before the veil. Sister Sarah, she whispered. Yes, she's alive. Good. Miguel's eyes went distant, touching the scar on his face. Very good. After I deliver you to Chihuahua, I think I'll pay her a visit. We have unfinished business, she and I. He turned to his men. Vámonos before someone finds the body. The Comancheros rode southwest away from the mission road. 6 nuns on horseback, hands bound, prayers dying on their lips. Behind them, Paulo's body lay in the dust, and the empty wagon creaked in the desert wind. The sun set red and violet over the Guadalupe Mountains. Sarah knew before the horse came into view. It was mid-morning, the second day after the wagon's departure. She was in the garden helping with the late summer vegetables when the mission horse appeared on the horizon. Alone, lathered, the harness broken and trailing. Mother Superior reached the animal first. Her hands found the bloody leather, the empty wagon seat traces. Her face went white. "Get the sheriff," she said quietly. "Now." Sarah ran. Sheriff Coleman arrived within the hour, his deputy and 2 volunteers trailing behind. They rode out together following the horse's back trail. Sarah went with them despite Mother Superior's protests. She couldn't explain the compulsion, only that her hands felt cold and her heart knew what they'd find. 15 miles south, the wagon sat abandoned in a canyon mouth. The supplies were scattered. Paulo's body lay where it had fallen, already being worried by coyotes. The sheriff's deputy turned away and vomited. Sarah dismounted. Her hands moved on their own, examining the ground. 8 sets of hoof prints. 6 sets of boot prints, too small to be men. The nuns had walked here, been forced onto horses, heading southwest, toward Mexico. "Comancheros," Coleman said grimly. He knelt beside Paulo's body. Single shot to the chest. Professional. Sarah found a piece of torn fabric caught on a cactus. Sister Maria's habit. She held it in her shaking hands. "How long?" she asked. 2 days, maybe less." The sheriff studied the tracks. "They're headed for the border. If they cross into Mexico—" "The cavalry," Mother Superior said. She'd ridden out with them, her old body rigid with fear. "We must contact Fort Bliss." "Ma'am, that'll take a week to organize. By then they'll be in Chihuahua," Sarah said. Her voice sounded strange in her own ears. Flat, cold, sold. The word hung in the desert air. Mother Superior turned to her. "Sarah, I'll track them." The words came before Sarah could stop them. "I know this country. I can move faster than a patrol." "You're a nun, not a tracker." "I was a rancher's wife for 10 years, Mother. I learned." Sarah looked at the hoof prints, her mind already calculating distances, water sources, likely routes. "I can find them." Sheriff Coleman shook his head. "1 woman against 8 armed men. Sister, that's suicide." "Then what do you suggest?" Sarah's voice rose. "We wait. We pray, while 6 women are sold into slavery. The authorities will take too long." She grabbed the torn fabric, thrust it toward them. "Sister Maria, Sister Anne, Sister Catherine Grace, Teresa Judith, 6 women who trusted God to protect them. Where was he when Comancheros came? Where is he now?" "Sister Sarah," Mother Superior's voice cracked like a whip. "Control yourself." Sarah's hands shook. She forced them still, forced the rage down into the dark place where she'd buried it 15 years ago. "Forgive me, Mother," she said, "but I won't abandon them." The ride back to the convent was silent. Sarah's mind churned. 8 men, 6 women, southwest toward Mexico, the Guadalupe Mountains, then the desert. If they pushed hard, maybe 5 days to the border. If they didn't, she tried not to think about what happened to women in Comanchero camps. That night, Sarah knelt in the chapel alone. The Winchester hung above her, mounted on the wall like a relic. Her hands reached for it before she could stop herself. The wood was cool under her fingers. The metal smelled of oil and old memories. She lifted it down and the weight settled into her arms like it had never left. "Forgive me, Father," she whispered. "I swore I'd never hold this rifle again." The chapel door opened. Mother Superior stood silhouetted in the doorway. "I wondered when you'd come here," the old woman said. Sarah didn't lower the rifle. "I have to go, Mother. I know. I'll break my vows." "Perhaps." Mother Superior moved into the chapel, her steps slow. "Or perhaps this is why God led you to us. For this moment. These women. I killed 5 men, Mother. Did you know that after Thomas died, I hunted them down and killed them?" Sarah's voice cracked. "I was good at it. I enjoyed it. And if I pick up this rifle again, you'll be the woman God needs you to be." Mother Superior touched Sarah's shoulder. "Not the woman you were. Not the woman you fear becoming. The woman you are now. I don't know who that is anymore." "Then go find out." The memory came like it always did, uninvited. Unstoppable. McClintock Ranch, New Mexico Territory. 1868. Sarah McClintock, 37 years old, stood in the kitchen of her ranch house watching her husband ride in from the southern pastures. Thomas sat tall in the saddle, his weathered face split by a grin. In his saddlebag, $800 from the cattle sale, enough to buy the water rights they'd been saving for. "Tom," she ran to meet him, her dress kicking up dust. Did Henderson pay fair better than fair? He dismounted, swept her into his arms. We can buy the creek land, plant alfalfa, maybe run another 100 head. She laughed against his chest. 10 years of marriage and still he could make her feel young. You and your plans. Our plans? He kissed her forehead. Come on, let me show you the money. You won't believe. The gunshot came from the tree line. Thomas jerked. His eyes went wide. Red bloomed across his chest, spreading fast. Tom. Sarah caught him as he fell. Tom, no. Please. 8 riders poured from the cottonwoods. Mexicans and Americans mixed, the kind of men who live between laws. Comancheros. The leader was young, maybe 38, with dark eyes and a cruel mouth. The money, senor, he called in accented English. Just give us the money. Thomas's blood was hot on Sarah's hands. She lowered him gently, her mind white with shock. The Winchester was in the house, 20 yards away. She could make it if she ran. She ran. Bullets chewed up the ground around her feet. She hit the door, grabbed the rifle from above the mantel. Checked the load. 7 rounds. Her hands didn't shake. That would come later. In the moment, there was only clarity. Sarah stepped onto the porch. The first Comanchero died before he could raise his pistol. The second took a round through the shoulder and fell from his horse. The third click. The Winchester jammed. A spent casing caught in the action, fouling the lever. The young leader advanced his revolver, aimed at her face. Drop it, senora. Sarah looked at Thomas bleeding in the dust, at the man who'd shot him, at her own death. She lowered the rifle. The leader smiled. Smart. Now the money? Thomas moved. Somehow dying, he found the strength to pull the knife from his boot. His throw was weak off target, but the blade caught the leader's face, opening a long gash from temple to jaw. The man screamed. Blood poured from the wound. His horse reared, and the gang scattered, thinking reinforcements had arrived. In seconds, they were gone, fleeing north with nothing but one dying man and a leader who'd lost half his face. Sarah dropped the rifle and ran to Thomas. He was barely conscious, blood bubbling from his lips. Sarah, I'm here, Tom. I'm here. Don't become... His hand gripped hers with failing strength. Don't become them. Promise me. I promise. Love you. Even if. Can't keep that promise. Love you. He died with his head in her lap in the sunset, painting the desert red. Sarah buried him the next day. Alone, Mom. The sheriff found her a week later, sitting by the grave, the Winchester across her knees. Mrs. McClintock, he said gently, you need to come to town. I need to find them. Ma'am, that's not... I need to find them, Sheriff. And she did. Over the next 6 months, Sarah McClintock hunted 5 Comancheros. She was methodical, patient, deadly. Each kill came easier than the last. By the end, she felt nothing but the cold satisfaction of vengeance. The priest found her after the 5th. Sarah, this has to stop. Why bahanda? Because you're becoming the very evil you're fighting. She looked at her hands, calloused, scarred, stained with blood that wouldn't wash away. Maybe that's what the world needs, more evil to fight evil. That's not what Thomas would have wanted. Thomas is dead, and you'll join him soon if you keep this path. The priest's eyes were kind but firm. Come to the convent, find peace before it's too late. Sarah joined in 1869, took the veil in 1870, buried the Winchester and her past together. For 15 years, she'd kept that promise to Thomas. Until now. Sarah stood in the chapel at midnight, the Winchester in her hands. Mother Superior sat in the front pew waiting. The old woman hadn't left since their conversation hours ago. Patient, knowing this was a decision Sarah had to make alone, but being present nonetheless. I made a vow, Sarah said, to Thomas, to go, to never kill again. And now 6 women are being taken to Mexico, to be sold, because I stayed here where it was safe, where I didn't have to face what I am. What are you, Sarah? A killer. The word tasted like ash. I killed 5 men, Mother, and I was good at it. I remember enjoying it, the power, the justice. I became something inhuman. Mother Superior rose, her old bones creaking. She crossed to Sarah, touched the rifle barrel. Or you became human. Grief and rage are human. What you did with them, that was the inhuman part. Then what makes this different? This time you're not hunting for revenge. The old woman's eyes were steady. You're hunting to save lives. That's not the same woman, Sarah. But what if I become her again? What if I find Miguel Vega and I don't just save the nuns, I kill him for what he did to Thomas? What if you do? Mother Superior's voice was soft. Would that be justice or vengeance? Sarah had no answer. Go, Mother Superior said. Find them. Save them if you can. But Sarah, remember what Thomas asked. Don't become them. Bring those women home without losing yourself in the process. I don't know if I can. Then have faith. Sarah looked at the crucifix above the altar, at the Winchester in her hands, at the door leading to the desert in the path she'd run from for 15 years. I vow, she said slowly, that I will bring them back. I will not kill unless there is no other choice. And if I break this vow, you won't, Mother Superior said. If I do, I leave the order. I won't bring that darkness back here. The old woman nodded. God go with you, Sister Sarah, and may you find the mercy you seek. Sarah spent the pre-dawn hours preparing. The Winchester first. She cleaned it thoroughly, checking the action, the barrel, the magazine. 50 rounds of .44 440 ammunition went into her belt and saddlebags. The Colt revolver, Thomas's old service pistol, went into a holster at her hip. 24 rounds for that. Medical supplies, bandages, carbolic acid for wounds, laudanum for pain, canteen, jerky, bedroll. A change of clothes. She stripped off the nun's habit and dressed in her old ranch clothes, the ones she'd kept in a trunk for 15 years. They still fit. The rosary beads went around her neck, Thomas's wedding ring on a chain beside them. She examined herself in the small mirror. Not Sister Sarah anymore. Not Sarah McClintock. Someone in between. Someone she didn't quite recognize. Sister Sarah, she turned. Sister Anne stood in the doorway, eyes red from crying. We heard. You're going after them. Yes. Bring them home. The Irish woman's voice broke. Please. I'll try. Sister Maria, she's my closest friend. And Sister Catherine, she's just a child, really. And the others, Anne stopped covering her face. I should have stayed. I should have been the one. This isn't your fault. Then whose is it? Sarah had no answer for that either. The sun was just touching the eastern mountains when she led her horse to the convent gate. Sheriff Coleman waited there, his face grim. Heard you're riding out, he said. Yes. Sister, you're one woman against 8 killers. Sarah checked the Winchester's action one last time. The lever worked smoothly. Memory and muscle combined into something that felt like prayer. I'm one woman who knows how to kill 8 men, she said. That's what terrifies me. She swung into the saddle. The horse sensed her tension and danced sideways. Sister, Coleman called, what do I tell the cavalry when they arrive? Sarah looked south where the desert stretched endless and brutal. Somewhere out there, 6 women rode in chains. Somewhere out there, Miguel Vega waited, the man who'd killed Thomas, who'd scarred her soul, who'd come back from the past, like all the things she'd tried to bury. Tell them to bring a wagon, she said. I'll have passengers for them. And if you fail, then tell them to bring 7 coffins. She touched her heels to the horse's flanks and rode toward the rising sun. Behind her, the convent bell began to ring. Mother Superior calling the sisters to prayer. Sarah didn't look back. The Winchester rode in the saddle scabbard, and the desert opened before her like a wound. 8 days of tracking ahead. 8 men to face, 6 women to save. And at the end of it all, a reckoning 15 years in the making. The wind picked up, carrying the smell of creosote and dust and the distant promise of violence. Sarah's hands settled on the reins, steady now. All the doubt and fear and guilt faded into the clarity she remembered from before. The cold focus of a hunter. Forgive me, Tom, she whispered, but I'm saving them my way. The horse lengthened into a lope. The miles began to pass, and somewhere ahead, Miguel Vega's camp waited. The tracks told Sarah everything she needed to know. 8 shod horses moving southwest at a steady pace. Not running. Confident. The hoof prints cut deep into the hardpan. 2 riders carried double weight. The nuns, hands bound, sharing saddles with their captors. A tactical choice. Harder for prisoners to escape when they couldn't control the horse. Smart. Sarah knelt beside a mesquite bush where a scrap of fabric clung to thorns. Dark wool, nun's habit. She touched it gently, then tucked it into her pocket alongside the piece she'd found at the wagon. The sun climbed toward noon. July heat shimmered off the desert floor, turning the horizon into liquid. Sarah had been riding since dawn, stopping every 2 hours to read the trail. The Comancheros were 12 hours ahead. Maybe less. She studied the droppings left by one of the horses, still moist. The flies hadn't fully colonized it yet. 10 hours, she revised. They'd camped somewhere ahead, rested through the worst heat. Lord, let me close the gap, she whispered. The mare snorted, swishing her tail at flies. Sarah poured water from her canteen into her hat and let the horse drink. Rationing was critical. The nearest reliable water was the San Pedro Creek, another 15 miles southwest. If the Comancheros knew the country, and Miguel Vega did, they'd water there. Sarah remounted. The Winchester's weight in the scabbard was a constant presence, like a second heartbeat. Thomas's voice came unbidden, a memory from 20 years past. Sarah, tracking ain't just about following prints. It's about thinking like your quarry. What would you do if you were running with prisoners in July heat? I'd push hard to the border, young Sarah had answered. They'd been tracking a lost calf, then nothing more dangerous than that. Would you, Thomas had grinned, or would you pace yourself? Dead prisoners don't fetch a price. Dehydrated women sell for less. You'd water them, rest them, keep them alive and valuable. Sarah's hands tightened on the reins. Thomas had taught her to think like a rancher. The world had taught her to think like a hunter. Miguel Vega was doing both. The afternoon stretched long and brutal. Sarah pushed the mare hard, but not too hard. A lame horse meant death out here. She found a rhythm lope for a mile walk, for a mile stop to track. The Comancheros' path was consistent. Southwest, always southwest, toward Mexico, toward Chihuahua, toward the brothels and slave markets where women disappeared forever. Sarah forced the thought away. Focus on the trail. Focus on the next mile. At 3 o'clock, she found the first camp. The site was in a draw shaded by cottonwoods. Recent, very recent. Sarah dismounted and worked the scene methodically. 8 sets of boot prints, 6 smaller prints the nuns forced to walk around while their captors rested. Rope fibers on a tree trunk where someone had been tied. A patch of ground where someone had knelt for a long time. Praying, maybe. Sarah found the cold remains of a fire. She touched the ashes. Still warm. 6 hours, maybe 7. They were getting closer. A piece of cloth caught her eye, half buried near the fire pit. She dug it out. A handkerchief embroidered with tiny flowers. Sister Catherine's work. The French nurse had a gift for needlework. Sarah pressed the cloth to her face. It smelled like smoke and fear. I'm coming, she said to the empty air. Hold on. The trail led southwest from the camp. Sarah followed it into rougher country. The Guadalupe Mountains rose ahead, their peaks sharp against the pale sky. The Comancheros were heading into the high passes. More difficult terrain, more places to hide, more opportunities for ambush. Sarah's tactical mind cataloged the dangers. Miguel knew someone would follow, eventually cavalry, maybe a posse. He was choosing ground that favored defenders, high country where 8 men could hold off 30. But he didn't know it was just one woman. One woman who'd killed 5 of his kind before. The sun touched the western peaks as Sarah made her own camp. She chose a spot in the rocks, defensible and hidden. No fire. Cold camp. The temperature would drop 40 degrees after dark, but firelight could be seen for miles. She ate jerky and hardtack, washing it down with tepid water. The mare grazed on sparse grass nearby, hobbled and alert. Sarah cleaned the Winchester by fading light, checking each component. The action was smooth. The barrel clean. 47 rounds left in her belt. Enough. When full dark fell, Sarah knelt on the hard ground. The rosary beads felt strange in her calloused hands. How many times had she prayed these words in the convent? Thousands. Tens of thousands. And yet tonight they felt different. Our Father who art in heaven. Her voice was barely a whisper. The desert swallowed the sound. Hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done. Was this his will? 6 women stolen. 1 woman hunting. Blood and violence waiting somewhere ahead. Forgive us our trespasses as we forgive those who trespass against us. Sarah's hands trembled. The beads clicked softly. and lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. She opened her eyes. The stars were brilliant overhead, undimmed by any human light. Out here, the universe felt vast and indifferent. God might be listening, or he might be watching to see what she'd do without his help. "Forgive me, Father," Sarah whispered, "for what I must do." She loaded the Winchester, 7 rounds in the magazine, 1 in the chamber. Her hands were steady now. The trembling was gone. The rifle lay beside her bedroll as she tried to sleep. Outside the circle of rocks, coyotes called to each other. Hunting cries, wild and hungry. Sarah knew the feeling. The body was a mile off the main trail. Sarah almost missed it. The Comancheros tracks continued southwest, but something made her pause. A disturbance in the brush. Drag marks leading into an arroyo, fresh enough that the wind hadn't erased them. She followed the marks on foot, leading the mare. The arroyo was narrow and deep, cutting through red rock. At the bottom, partially covered with stones and dirt, Sarah found Sister Grace. The young nun lay on her back, eyes closed. Someone had arranged her hands across her chest in a mockery of peaceful rest. The wound on her throat was clean, professional, a single cut ear to ear. Sarah dropped to her knees. "No." The word came out strangled. "No, no, no." Sister Grace, 23 years old, shy, kind, could make bread rise like nobody's business. She'd only taken her vows 2 years ago. She'd been so excited about the Santa Fe mission, so eager to serve. Sarah's hands shook as she touched the girl's face. The body was cool, dead maybe 12 hours. They'd killed her sometime yesterday during the march. Probably slowed them down, couldn't keep pace in the heat, so they'd killed her and kept moving. Sarah sat back on her heels, her vision blurred. When she blinked, tears tracked down her dusty face. "God will protect us," Sister Ann had said before they left. Where was he now? Sarah's hand found the Winchester. Her fingers wrapped around the stock, and for a moment, just a heartbeat, she was somewhere else. Another time, another body. The first Comanchero had begged, "Please, Senora, I have children, a wife." Sarah's rifle hadn't wavered. So did my husband. The shot had echoed across the canyon. The man had fallen, and Sarah had felt nothing. Just cold satisfaction. 1 down, 4 to go. The memory faded. Sarah was in the arroyo again, kneeling beside a dead nun. Her hands trembled on the rifle. "Lord, test my mercy now," she whispered. But there was no answer, just the wind and the distant cry of a raven. Sarah spent an hour burying Sister Grace. The ground was hard and she had no proper tools, but she dug with her hands in a flat rock until the grave was deep enough. She arranged the stones carefully over the body. No coyotes would disturb this rest. She fashioned a cross from mesquite branches, binding them with a strip torn from her own shirt. She planted it at the head of the grave. "Hail Mary, full of grace," Sarah began. Her voice cracked. "The Lord is with thee. Blessed art thou amongst women." The prayer felt hollow. Grace had been blessed, had been full of God's favor, and she died with her throat cut in a West Texas arroyo, murdered by men who valued her at $500. "Blessed is the fruit of thy womb, Jesus." Jesus hadn't saved her. "Holy Mary, Mother of God, pray for us sinners, now and at the hour of our death." Sarah finished the prayer and stood. Her knees were scraped raw from kneeling on stone. Her hands were filthy with dirt and blood. 5 nuns left, 8 Comancheros. And every mile southwest increased the odds that she'd find another grave. Sarah mounted the mare. The rage in her chest was a living thing, now hot and sharp. She gave it a name, Justice. She told herself it was holy. But deep down in the place where she couldn't lie, she knew it was just vengeance wearing a cross. The tracks led on. Sarah followed. The country grew rougher. Sarah pushed through mountain passes where the trail narrowed to single file. The Comancheros were making for the high desert beyond the Guadalupes. Smart again. The terrain was brutal, but it was also unmapped and lawless. No cavalry patrols, no settlements, just empty country where a man could do as he pleased. The mare's left front hoof was developing a stone bruise. Sarah had noticed it that morning. She'd packed the hoof with wet clay and a poultice of crushed prickly pear, an old Apache remedy Thomas had taught her. It would hold for another day, maybe 2. After that, she'd be on foot. Sarah rationed water carefully. The creek she'd hoped to reach was dry. Climate change or seasonal variation, it didn't matter. The result was the same. She found water instead in barrel cacti, cutting them open and squeezing the pulp into her canteen. The water was bitter and made her stomach cramp, but it kept her alive. At midday, she found the Comancheros' second camp. This one was more revealing. They'd stayed longer rested through the worst heat. Sarah worked the site methodically, reading it like text. 8 bedrolls, 6 ropes tied to trees the nuns kept separate, unable to escape or help each other. A fire pit with the remains of coffee and beans, and blood on the rocks. Not much, but enough. Someone had been injured. The blood was fresh, maybe 6 hours old. Sarah found torn fabric nearby, part of a nun's habit used as a bandage. Sister Teresa, she thought. The gardener. The one who'd fought back at the wagon. Miguel had hit her hard. Maybe she'd gotten hurt in the fall. Maybe the injury was infected. Or maybe they'd beaten her again. Sarah's jaw clenched. She forced herself to keep searching. Focus. Think. The tracks leaving the camp were different. Subtle, but there. One horse was limping slightly, and the spacing between prints was irregular. Someone riding wounded, unable to sit the saddle properly. Good. Let them suffer. Sarah checked herself immediately. No, not good. Teresa was hurt and needed help. That wasn't something to celebrate. But the dark part of her mind, the part that had hunted 5 men to their deaths, whispered otherwise. Every injury slowed them down. Every problem gave her time to catch up. The moral calculus of pursuit. Thomas's voice again. Sarah, you can't save everyone. Sometimes you have to choose between the perfect and the possible. Don't let perfection paralyze you. But this wasn't about perfection. This was about 5 women still alive and 1 already dead. Sarah remounted and rode on. The sun was merciless. The temperature had to be over 100 degrees. She wrapped her face in cloth to protect against the sun and dust. Her lips were cracked and bleeding. Her water was running low again. At 3 o'clock, she found something that made her blood run cold. The Comancheros had split the trail. False tracks led west. Real tracks continued southwest. But there was also a snare trap, carefully hidden tripwire designed to catch a following horse at the ankle. Sarah's mare had nearly stepped into it before Sarah spotted the disturbed ground. She dismounted and examined the trap carefully. Professional work, the kind of thing an experienced tracker would set. Miguel knew someone was following. Maybe he'd seen dust on his back trail. Maybe one of his men had scouted behind. Or maybe he was just being cautious. Either way, the message was clear. I know you're there. Sarah's hands tightened on the reins. This changed everything. If Miguel knew he was being followed, he'd prepare, set more traps, maybe stage an ambush. Or maybe this was all psychological warfare. Make the pursuer paranoid. Slow them down with caution. Sarah studied the false trail. It led west toward rougher country. If she followed it, she could waste a day before realizing the mistake. By then, the Comancheros would be 24 hours ahead. But if she ignored it and it was real, she'd lose them entirely. Clever, she muttered. Damn you, Miguel, still clever. She dismounted and examined both trails carefully. The false trail was too obvious. The prints were deeper than they should be for unloaded horses. Someone had led horses back and forth, deliberately creating tracks. The real trail was subtler, but they're barely visible. Sarah found a thread caught on a low branch. Dark fabric. Nun's habit. You're fighting back, Teresa, Sarah said softly. Good girl. She followed the real trail, but now she moved differently. Slower, more cautious, checking for traps, watching the high ground for lookouts. The hunter had become the hunted. The sun was setting when Sarah spotted the camp. 2 miles ahead, in a valley between hills. Smoke from a cooking fire. The Comancheros had stopped early, confident in their lead. Or confident they'd spot anyone approaching across the open ground. Sarah hobbled her horse in a draw and continued on foot. The Winchester came with her. She moved carefully, using every bit of cover. An hour passed, then another. The sun set and stars emerged. By the time Sarah was within 300 yards, full dark had fallen. The Comanchero camp was lit by firelight. She could see figures moving. Count them. 7 men, 1 missing, scout maybe, or lookout. Sarah crawled the last 100 yards on her belly, moving inches at a time. Her hands found purchase on rocks. Her knees scraped on gravel. It took 3 hours to cover the distance. But when she stopped, she was close enough to hear voices. The nuns were tied to a wagon wheel, hands bound behind them. Sarah counted 5. Maria, Anne, Catherine, Teresa, her leg wrapped in bloody cloth. Judith sitting silent and hollow-eyed. Grace was gone. They knew. She could see it in their faces. Miguel sat near the fire cleaning a rifle. His scarred face was turned toward the flames, and the firelight made the old wound look like a canyon carved in flesh. He said something in Spanish that made the other men laugh. 2 guards circled the camp in slow rotation. The others played cards, drank from a bottle of mezcal, cleaned weapons. Sarah settled into position behind a rock outcrop. From here, she had a clear line of sight. 300 yards. Long range for the Winchester, but manageable. She could put a round through Miguel's head right now, end this. But the guards would kill the nuns before she could reload. 7 men, 5 hostages. The math didn't work. She needed to get closer, wait for an opportunity, maybe when they slept. Sarah settled in to wait. Her breathing slowed. Her heartbeat dropped. This was the patience of the hunter. She'd done this before. And then she heard it. 2 guards talking in Spanish. Their voices carried in the still night air. "Why keep these nuns?" one asked. "Just sell them now. Get the money." "Patience, hermano," the second voice. "El jefe has a plan." "What plan?" "We're bait for a bigger fish." Sarah's blood went cold. "What fish?" "Sarah McClintock, the woman who scarred his face. He knows she'll come." The first guard laughed. "1 woman against 8 of us. She killed 3 of our men 15 years ago. In 1 fight. El jefe says she's dangerous. Then we kill her when she arrives. No, we capture her. He wants her to watch the nuns die. Then he'll take his time with her." Sarah's hands tightened on the Winchester. Trap. This whole thing was a trap. Miguel had known she'd follow, had counted on it. The nuns were bait, for her, and she'd walked right into it. A twig snapped behind her. Sarah rolled, bringing the Winchester up. The guard was 15 feet away, rifle raised. He'd been circling wide, checking the perimeter. And he'd found her. "¿Quién está ahí?" he shouted. "Who's there?" Flashlight beams swept across the rocks. Sarah froze. Maybe he hadn't seen the guard took another step. His boot came down directly on Sarah's hand. Pain exploded up her arm. She had no choice. No time to think. Only react. Sarah drew the knife from her boot and thrust upward. The blade caught the guard in the thigh-deep muscle, not artery. Disabling, not fatal. He screamed and his rifle fired wild. The camp exploded into motion. "Alerta! Es ella! Ufuo!" Miguel's voice roaring. "It's her, Sarah McClintock!" Men grabbed weapons. Nuns screamed. Sarah was already moving, hauling the wounded guard in front of her as a shield. His blood was hot on her hands. First compromise, some distant part of her mind noted. Using a wounded man as cover. Thomas wouldn't approve. She had no time for guilt. Comancheros were spreading out surrounding her position. Sarah fired the Winchester, one-handed her other arm, hooked around the guard's neck. The shot went wide, but sent 2 men diving for cover. She was in a rocky outcrop, defensible for maybe 2 minutes. After that, they'd flank her, and it was over. "Sarah," Miguel's voice carried across the dark. 15 years, did you miss me?" She didn't answer. "Conserve ammunition. Pick targets. I have your little nuns, Sarah, surrender, or I kill one every minute." The math changed. Sarah's tactical mind ran the calculations. Stay hidden, they kill the nuns. Surrender, they kill everyone eventually. Fight low odds, but Miguel dragged Sister Anne forward. Put his pistol to her head. "Diez," he shouted, counting down. "Nueve ocho." Sarah saw Sister Anne's face in the firelight. Saw the Irish woman's eyes wide with terror, but also pleading. Begging Sarah not to surrender. Not to die for her. "Siete seis." "I'm sorry, Tom." Sarah thought. "I tried. I really tried." She stood up, hands raised. The Winchester fell to the ground. "Miguel," she called. Her voice was steady. "Let them go. You want me, not them." Miguel's laugh echoed across the camp. "Oh, Sarah, I want both." 3 Comancheros rushed forward and bound Sarah's hands behind her back. They weren't gentle. One of them, Pablo, the man she'd shot in the shoulder during the firefight, hit her hard across the face. Puta, he spat. You shot me. Sarah tasted blood. She said nothing. They dragged her into the firelight. Miguel approached slowly, his scarred face unreadable. He studied her for a long moment. Then he reached out and touched the scar on his cheek. 15 years, he said softly. I've dreamed of this moment. Then kill me and get it over with. Kill you quick. Miguel's smile was cold. No honor in that, Sarah. You took my face, my pride, 3 of my men. You think I'll give you a clean death? He backhanded her. Sarah's head snapped to the side. Blood ran from her split lip. You'll watch your nuns die, Miguel continued. One by one, slowly. And when the last one falls, then I'll take my time with you. He leaned close. I have a special place in mind. Old Spanish mission. 1 day's ride from here. Perfect for what I have planned. Sarah met his eyes. You're still the same coward who murdered my husband. Miguel hit her again. Harder. Gag her, he ordered. Tie her to a horse. We ride at dawn. The flashback came during the forced march the next day. Sarah, hands bound to a saddle horn, walking alongside a horse in the brutal heat, let her mind drift to escape the pain. 6 months after Thomas's death, Sarah stood in the shadows outside a cantina in Las Cruces. It was midnight. The man she was hunting was inside drinking. His name was Rodriguez, one of the 3 Comancheros who'd escaped the ranch that day. She'd found him through patience and coin, asked questions in the right places, followed leads. Now she knew where he drank, where he slept, where he was vulnerable. Sarah checked the Winchester. Loaded, ready. She felt nothing. No fear, no excitement, just cold purpose. Rodriguez emerged at 1 o'clock drunk and stumbling. He headed for the alley where he kept his horse. Sarah followed like a ghost. When she stepped into the alley behind him, he was fumbling with buying his saddle. Rodriguez, she said. He turned, squinted at her in the dark. Senora, you need something of justice. She shot him in the chest. He fell. The Winchester's action worked smoothly. She chambered another round and stood over him. That's for Thomas, she said. He died without speaking. Sarah felt no satisfaction, just completion. 1 task finished, 2 more to go. She found the second man 3 weeks later, shot him from ambush. No conversation, no ceremony, just a bullet. The third took 2 months. But when she finally cornered him in a canyon near El Paso, something was different. She had him dead to rights. Winchester aimed. Clear shot. He was begging for his life, crying. And Sarah felt nothing, not anger, not grief, not even satisfaction, just empty coldness. She pulled the trigger and walked away before he stopped moving. That night, she stared at her hands. They were steady, no tremor, no shame. She'd killed 3 men in 6 months and felt nothing at all. The priest found her 2 days later, sitting by Thomas's grave. Sarah, he said gently, I heard about Las Cruces and the others. Good, she said. Maybe the rest will run. Sarah, this has to stop. Why? Because you're becoming the very evil you're fighting. She looked at him. Maybe that's what the world needs, more evil to fight evil. That's not what Thomas wanted. Thomas is dead. The priest knelt beside him. And you'll join him soon if you keep this path. Not from a bullet, Sarah, from losing your soul. His hand touched her shoulder. Come to the convent. Find peace before it's too late. Sarah looked at the Winchester in her lap, at her hands, at the grave markers she'd carved herself. I don't know if I can, she whispered. Then have faith. Sarah came back to the present with a jolt. The sun was setting. They'd been marching all day. Her feet were blistered. Her wrists were raw from the ropes. But her mind was clear now, dangerously clear. The young Comanchero Carlos was guarding her. He was nervous, kept glancing at Miguel, like a dog expecting to be kicked. Sarah studied him carefully. 19, maybe 20. Still had softness in his face. Hadn't been hardened by too many years of this life yet. A weakness she could exploit. Carlos, she said softly. Spanish came easily to her tongue. You're young. This isn't your path yet. Shut up, nun. You haven't killed anyone, have you? I can see it in your eyes. He flinched. I killed a man in Juarez. Sarah smiled faintly. You're a bad liar, just like my husband was. Carlos's hand tightened on his rifle. You don't know anything about me. I know you're not like them. Sarah nodded toward Miguel and the others. Diego enjoys hurting people. Miguel's driven by revenge. But you just need money. Your father died and you had debts. Carlos's eyes widened. How did you? Because I've seen 1,000 young men like you, Carlos. Good boys who made bad choices. But there's still time. When this ends, you'll have a choice. Die with Miguel or walk away. I can't just, you can and you will. Sarah's voice was calm, certain. Because you're not a killer. Not yet. Carlos looked away. His hands shook slightly on the rifle. Seed planted, Sarah thought. Now to let it grow. The Spanish mission appeared at midday, rising from the desert like a broken tooth. Misión de Nuestra Señora. Sarah knew it. She and Thomas had scouted this area back in 1867, looking for good rangeland. The mission dated to the 1680s, abandoned for a century. Adobe walls 15 feet high, crumbling but still defensible. A bell tower with no bell, courtyard with a dry well, and only one entrance. Perfect for what Miguel had planned. A killing ground with an audience. They rode through the gate. The courtyard was dusty and empty, filled with the ghosts of Spanish priests and Apache raids and centuries of violence. Miguel's men secured the perimeter while the nuns were dragged from their horses. Sarah watched everything, cataloged details, the layout, the defensive positions, the weapons, the men. Miguel gathered everyone in the courtyard as the sun reached its zenith. Sarah, he announced, his voice carrying in the enclosed space. Tomorrow at dawn, I execute your nuns, 1 per hour. You'll watch each one die from that bellowing tower. He pointed. Then at sunset, I kill you. Consider it mercy. I'm giving you time to pray. The nuns reacted differently. Sister Maria whispered prayers. Sister Anne spat at Miguel and got backhanded for it. Sister Catherine tried to comfort the traumatized Judith. Sister Teresa, feverish from her infected leg, barely responded. They dragged Sarah to the bell tower and chained her hands to a rusty iron ring anchored in the wall. The chain was old, the iron corroded by 2 centuries of weather. But it held. The window overlooked the courtyard. Sarah would have a perfect view of everything Miguel planned. Carlos brought her water. He wouldn't meet her eyes. Thank you, Sarah said quietly. He fled without answering. Sarah was alone. The sun set slowly, painting the mission walls red. Below, she heard Miguel's men preparing. Wood being gathered, posts being erected, laughter and the clink of bottles. Sarah looked at the broken crucifix on the wall. Christ's face was worn away by time, leaving only a smooth stone suggestion of suffering. Lord, she whispered, I need a miracle, or permission to become a devil again. No answer came, just the wind through broken stone and the distant sound of men who planned to murder 5 women at dawn. Sarah pulled at the chains. They rattled but held. For now. The gunshot woke her. Sarah jerked upright, the chains rattling. Below in the courtyard, Miguel stood with his pistol raised. Smoke drifted from the barrel. Sister Judith lay crumpled at the base of the execution post. No, Sarah screamed. Miguel, no. But the German seamstress was already gone. Her last words had been in German, the Lord's Prayer whispered in her mother tongue. Vater unser im Himmel. And then silence. Sarah, Miguel's voice floated up. Did you sleep well? Because that's one. In an hour I take another and another, until they're all gone and you're left alone with your failure. Sarah pulled at the chains. The iron cut into her wrists. Blood ran down her hands. Take me instead, she screamed. Miguel, kill me instead. No, no, no. His laugh echoed off the walls. You suffer first, then you die. The morning dragged on. Miguel's men took down Judith's body and prepared the next post. Sister Maria prayed continuously in Spanish. Sister Anne stared at the sky, her Irish eyes dry and hard. Sister Catherine held the catatonic Teresa, whispering French words of comfort. Sarah tried everything. Picked at the lock with a piece of wire from her rosary beads, tried to break the chain, screamed until her voice was raw. Nothing worked. An hour passed, then another. Miguel was savoring this, drawing it out, making Sarah watch the preparations, the terror in the nuns' faces, the inexorable approach of death. By noon, Sarah had stopped screaming, stopped fighting. She sat against the wall, chains slack, and stared at nothing. I failed, she thought. Grace is dead, Judith is dead, and I'm going to watch 3 more women die before Miguel finally ends this. The rage that had driven her for 8 days was gone. In its place was just emptiness. She tried to be the person Mother Superior believed in, the person who could save lives without losing her soul, and she'd failed completely. Maybe the priest had been wrong. Maybe you couldn't find peace after violence. Maybe some stains never wash clean. Sarah looked at her hands, bloody from pulling at the chains, scarred from years of work, marked by the deaths of 5 men 15 years ago. Killer's hands. She tried to be something else, but in the end, you are what you are. The afternoon sun slanted through the window, painting everything gold and red, beautiful, indifferent. Sarah closed her eyes, and then very quietly she began to remember. Thomas dying in her arms, the sunset painting the ranch red, his last words. Sarah, don't become them. Don't let hate define you. I promise, Tom. I promise, but she'd broken that promise, not in a day or a week, slowly. Each kill easier than the last, each death leaving less of her humanity behind. The first man had begged, the second had fought, the third had died without knowing why. And by the fifth, Sarah had stood over a dying Comanchero and felt nothing. No satisfaction, no grief, no rage, just cold, empty completion. That's when she'd known. The priest was right. She was becoming the very thing she hunted. So she'd stopped, joined the convent, taken vows, buried the Winchester, and convinced herself she'd found peace. But it was a lie. 15 years of pretending, of avoiding the rifle on the chapel wall, of telling herself she wasn't a killer anymore. And where had that gotten her? One nun dead, a second executed, 3 more waiting to die, and Sarah chained in a tower, helpless and broken. Sarah opened her eyes. The sun was low now, touching the western wall. She'd been lost in memory for hours. Thomas said, "Don't become like them," she whispered to the empty tower. I failed. She looked at the rosary beads tangled in her chains, at the crucifix on the wall, at her bloody hands. Father at the convent said violence scars the soul. He was right. Her voice was steady now, almost calm. For 15 years I pretended I wasn't a killer. But I am. The admission should have hurt, should have felt like defeat. Instead, it felt like clarity. I like killing. The words tasted strange, terrible, true. The rush, the power, the justice of it. Sarah laughed. The sound was harsh and broken. God forgive me, I'm about to like it again. She stopped crying, stopped praying. Instead, she began to think. The chains were rusty. 200 years of weather had weakened the iron. With enough force in the right place, they might break. The window was 8 feet above the courtyard. Survivable drop if she rolled right. 7 Comancheros. Most would be drunk by nightfall. Miguel always let his men drink before violence. Made them cruel. Weapons, she had the small knife still hidden in her boot. The rosary wire. Nothing else. But she'd killed 3 men with less. Sarah examined the chains carefully. The iron ring was anchored deep in the wall, but the chain itself had a weak link about 2 feet from the ring. Corroded, thin. She wrapped the chain around both hands and pulled. Nothing. She pulled harder. The metal cut into her palms but didn't break. Sarah took a breath. Then she stood, turned so the chain was at full extension, and threw her whole body weight against it. The weak link snapped. Sarah felt hard chains still attached to her wrists, but no longer anchored to the wall. She lay gasping on the stone floor, hands bleeding, but free. Free. She crawled to the window and looked out. The courtyard below was empty except for 2 guards on rotation. The others were in the chapel with Miguel, drinking and playing cards. The nuns were locked in the old sacristy, stone room barred door. No way to free them without making noise. Sarah looked at the broken crucifix on the wall one last time. "Forgive me, Tom," she whispered, "but I'm saving them my way." She tore off what was left of her nun's habit. Underneath, she wore the plain frontier dress she'd put on 9 days ago. Dark, practical, made for work. Sarah McClintock looked at her hands one last time. Bloody, scarred, killer's hands. Then she smiled and began to plan. The mission slept. Sarah moved like smoke through the darkness, The chains still hung from her wrists, wrapped in cloth to muffle their rattle. Her hands were steady despite the blood. Despite the 9 days of pursuit and capture and watching Sister Judith die at dawn. All that mattered now was the cool weight of the knife in her right hand in the courtyard below. The drop from the bell tower window was 8 feet. Sarah went feet first, twisting as she fell. She hit the thatched roof of an old storage shed and rolled, distributing the impact. The roof groaned but held. She slid to the edge and dropped again, landing in a crouch in the shadows. No alarm, the guards hadn't heard. Sarah pressed against the adobe wall, breathing slow and controlled. From here, she could see the whole courtyard. 2 guards on rotation, one at the gate, one circling the perimeter. 5 men sleeping around the dying campfire. Miguel in the chapel, his silhouette visible through the broken doorway. 7 targets, 1 knife, no room for error. The gate guard was young Carlos, rifle held awkwardly across his chest. He kept glancing toward the chapel like a child afraid of the dark. Sarah watched him for 5 minutes, timing his patrol pattern. Every 3 minutes, he walked to the far side of the gate to check the desert beyond. She waited for the cycle. When Carlos turned his back, Sarah moved. 20 yards. Silent. The knife felt like an extension of her arm. This was the clarity she tried to bury for 15 years. The cold focus of someone who'd killed before and would kill again. But not tonight. Not unless there was no other choice. Sarah came up behind Carlos and pressed the knife to his throat. Her other hand covered his mouth. "Don't move," she whispered in Spanish. "Don't make a sound." Carlos froze. She could feel his heart hammering against her arm. "Choice time, Carlos." Sarah's voice was calm, almost gentle. "Live or die. Your call." "Por favor," he breathed against her palm. "Please, where are the nuns?" "Sacristy. Diego has the key." "Your gun." Slowly. Carlos's hands trembled as he unslung the Colt revolver. Sarah took it, checked the cylinder. 6 rounds. She tucked it into her belt and stepped back, releasing him. "Run," she said. "South. Don't look back. If I see you again, I'll kill you." Carlos stared at her. In the moonlight, his face looked very young. "You're letting me go. You're not a killer yet. Don't become one tonight." He ran. Sarah watched him disappear into the darkness, then moved toward the well where the second guard stood watch. Luis, the quiet one. Professional, dangerous. Sarah circled wide, using the mission walls as cover. The rosary beads were still around her neck, wire core glinting in the starlight. Thomas had taught her this technique 25 years ago. A last resort, he'd called it. Something to know and pray you never use. Tonight, she'd use it. Luis was checking the well when Sarah came up behind him. The wire loop went around his throat. She pulled. His hands clawed at the wire but couldn't find purchase. He tried to turn to fight, but Sarah had leverage and surprise. 20 seconds. That's how long it took. Luis's struggles weakened, stopped. Sarah lowered the body, gently checking for a pulse. Gone. "Forgive me, Father," she whispered, "for I must sin to save your daughters." She felt nothing, no satisfaction, no guilt, just the mechanical completion of a necessary task. Sarah took Luis's rifle, a Sharps .50 caliber, heavy and powerful, and his ammunition belt. She was armed now, armed and dangerous in the way Miguel Vega had feared for 15 years. The hunter was loose in the killing ground. Sarah moved to the bell tower's base where she'd cached the knife and Carlos's revolver. She wrapped the chains around her forearms like armor, tucking the loose ends into her belt. Not ideal, but they might deflect a knife or provide some protection. The courtyard was a tactical puzzle. 5 men around the fire, Miguel in the chapel, the nuns locked in the sacristy on the chapel's far side. To free them, she'd have to cross 50 yards of open ground and break a locked door. Impossible without raising an alarm, so she'd raise it on her terms. Sarah climbed back to the bell tower, taking the Sharps rifle with her. From this elevation, she had clear shots at the entire courtyard. The 5 men by the fire were easy targets. Miguel would be harder, he'd have cover in the chapel. She settled into position, bracing the rifle on the windowsill. The weight was familiar. The mechanics of killing remembered by muscles that never forgot. Thomas's voice. "Sarah, a rifle's not just a tool. It's a commitment. When you aim at a man, you're deciding he needs to die more than he needs to live. You better be damn sure you're right." Was she right Miguel Vega had murdered Thomas? Had killed Sister Grace and Sister Judith? Had planned to execute 3 more women at dawn for no reason except Sarah's suffering? She was right, but Thomas's teachings went deeper than that. Being right and being righteous aren't the same thing. Sometimes the righteous path is harder than the right one. Sarah pushed the philosophy away. Time for that later. Now was time for action. She found her target, Ramon, the tracker. He'd separated from the group scouting the perimeter as professionals do. He was near the well, standing over Luis's body, his mouth open to shout. Sarah fired. The sharps roared. Ramon's chest exploded. He dropped without a sound. The courtyard erupted. Alerta! Someone screamed. Es ella Sarah McClintock. Men grabbed weapons. The campfire scattered as bodies dove for cover. Sarah worked the sharps action slower than a Winchester, but devastating at range. She found Esteban the drunk stumbling toward the well and fired. The heavy bullet caught him center mass. He went down and didn't move. 2 dead, 5 remaining. Miguel somewhere in the chapel. Sarah's position was compromised now. Muzzle flash had given her away. She had maybe 30 seconds before they organized a response. She used 20 of them to reload, then shouted into the darkness. Miguel, it's me, Sarah McClintock. You wanted to hunt me. Come on! The answer came in gunfire. Bullets chewed up the bell tower's adobe walls, sending dust and fragments flying. Sarah dropped below the window, counted to 3, then rose and fired again. Pablo, wounded from the earlier firefight, was charging her position. The sharps round took him in the shoulder, spinning him like a top. He went down screaming. 3 down, 4 to go. Sarah abandoned the bell tower. Her position was compromised, and they'd flank her soon. She moved down the interior stairs, sharps in one hand, Colt in the other. The courtyard was chaos. Miguel's voice roared orders in Spanish. Men were taking positions behind the well and doorways using the mission walls. Sarah came out low and fast, using the execution posts as cover. Diego, Miguel's lieutenant, was circling left with a shotgun. She saw him in her peripheral vision and dove as buckshot peppered the post where she'd been standing. The Colt came up. Sarah fired twice. Both rounds hit shoulder and leg. Diego went down, blood spreading dark across the dust. Movement to her right. 2 Comancheros she didn't know by name rushed her position. Sarah dropped the Colt and swung the sharps like a club. The stock caught one man across the jaw with a sickening crack. He dropped. The second had a knife. He lunged. Sarah sidestepped using the technique Thomas had drilled into her 25 years ago. The blade missed by inches. She brought the rifle butt up into his solar plexus. He folded. 4 down, 3 to go. But the odds had changed. Sarah was in the open now, exposed, and Miguel was moving. Sarah, his voice echoed from the chapel. Stop or they die. She looked up. Miguel stood in the chapel doorway, her Winchester, the rifle she'd lost when captured, pressed to Sister Anne's head. Sister Teresa was beside him, barely conscious, held up by another Comanchero. A human shield, the oldest tactic in the world. Sarah froze. Drop your weapons, Miguel commanded. Or I shoot this Irish bitch. The math was simple. Miguel was 50 yards away. The sharps was accurate at that range, but there was no shot. Sister Anne was directly in front of him. Any bullet that hit Miguel would go through her first. Sarah's hands tightened on the rifle. Sometimes you can't save everyone, Thomas had said. Sometimes you have to choose. But that was the old Sarah, the killer who'd valued revenge over lives. The woman who'd stood over dying men and felt nothing. She wasn't that woman anymore. Or was she? Sarah's finger found the trigger. The shot was impossible. 50 yards, wind, low light, a target mostly behind cover, and Sister Anne directly in the line of fire. But she'd made impossible shots before. Thomas's voice again. Breathe out slow. Squeeze, don't pull. Lead the target. Sarah's breath steadied. The world narrowed to the sight picture. Front post, rear notch. Miguel's left hand gripping the Winchester. If she hit the receiver just right, the impact would shatter the action without penetrating. The rifle would be destroyed. Miguel disarmed. One chance. If she missed by an inch, Sister Anne died. Sarah squeezed the trigger. The sharps roared. 50 yards away, sparks flew from the Winchester. The rifle exploded in Miguel's hands, metal fragments cutting his palm. He screamed and dropped the weapon. Sister Anne moved. bit down on Miguel's arm. Hard. Drew blood. He backhanded her and she fell. But she'd given Sarah the opening. Sarah was already moving, sprinting across the courtyard. Miguel disappeared into the chapel, dragging Sister Teresa with him. The last Comanchero, the one Sarah had hit with the rifle stock, provided covering fire. Bullets chased Sarah's heels. She dove through a doorway as adobe exploded behind her. Inside the chapel, dark, dangerous, Miguel's territory now, Sarah checked her ammunition. 3 rounds in the Colt. The Sharps was empty. She'd used the last round on the impossible shot. The knife was still in her boot. Not much, but enough. She moved through the chapel's ruins. Moonlight filtered through the broken roof, creating patterns of shadow and silver. Somewhere ahead, she heard breathing. Movement. The scrape of a boot on stone. A shape lunged from behind a confessional booth. Sarah fired the Colt. The muzzle flash lit the chapel like lightning. The Comanchero went down, clutching his leg. 2 rounds left. The second man came from her left, knife in hand. Sarah dropped the pistol and caught his wrist, using his momentum against him. They went down together in a tangle of limbs. His knife scraped across the chain armor on her forearm. The improvised protection saved her from a gutting. Sarah headbutted him. His nose broke with a wet crunch. She grabbed the Sharps and swung it like a club. The heavy barrel connected with his temple. He stopped moving. Sarah stood, breathing hard. Blood ran from a dozen small cuts. Her left shoulder was screaming where she'd taken a graze earlier. The chains on her wrists had chafed her skin raw. But she was alive, and there was only one man left. "Miguel," she called into the darkness. "It's over. Let Teresa go. Let them all go." His laugh echoed off stone walls. "Over? This is just beginning, Sarah." He stepped from behind the altar. Sister Teresa was in front of him, barely conscious of Miguel's arm around her throat. But in his other hand, Sarah's heart sank. Her Winchester. Miguel had grabbed a second rifle from somewhere. Loaded. Aimed. They stood 15 feet apart in the ruined chapel. Miguel armed and behind a hostage. Sarah with an empty Colt and no way to reach her knife without him shooting. Mexican standoff. "You're a hard woman to kill," Miguel said. His scarred face was half shadow in the moonlight. 15 years I've dreamed of this, and you still surprise me. Let her go, Miguel. This is between us. Is it? He tightened his grip on Teresa. The nun whimpered. Or is it about what you are, what we both are, killers, Sarah? You and me, the same. I'm nothing like you. No, Miguel's smile was cold. I killed your husband for money. You killed 5 of my men for revenge. What's the difference? Sarah's hand moved toward the knife in her boot, slowly, carefully. The difference, she said as I stopped. Did you? Miguel gestured at the courtyard beyond. 5 men dead or dying out there. And you expect me to believe you've changed. You're exactly what you were 15 years ago, a killer wearing a cross. Was he right? The thought struck like a knife. Sarah looked at her bloody hands, at the bodies she'd left behind. Ramon garroted, Luis strangled, Esteban shot, the others wounded or dead. 5 men, just like before. You hesitate, Miguel said. You know I'm right. You enjoyed it. The hunt, the kill, the justice of it. He leaned close to Teresa. So go ahead. Shoot me. Prove you're still that woman, or admit you're weak now, that the convent made you soft. Sarah's hand found the knife, but she didn't draw it. Thomas's voice clear as if he stood beside her. Don't become them, Sarah. Don't let hate define you. I'm not going to kill you, Miguel. He blinked. What? I said, I'm not going to kill you. Sarah lowered her hand from the knife. Not because you deserve mercy, because I don't deserve the darkness. You're bluffing. Am I? Sarah took a step forward, unarmed, vulnerable. You'll hang in El Paso for Sister Grace, for Sister Judith, for Thomas, legal justice, the kind that doesn't stain souls. Miguel's finger tightened on the trigger. You're a fool. Maybe, but I'm free. He fired. The bullet should have taken Sarah in the chest, should have ended everything. But in the instant Miguel pulled the trigger, Sister Teresa, fevered, half-conscious, threw her weight backward. Miguel's aim shifted. The bullet went wide. Sarah moved. Not for her knife, not for a weapon. She lunged forward inside Miguel's guard and grabbed the Winchester's barrel. Twisted. The hot metal burned her palm, but she didn't let go. Miguel tried to lever the rifle free, but Sarah was stronger, younger, desperate. They struggled, the Winchester between them like a bridge. Miguel's scarred face, inches from hers, twisted with rage and hate and 15 years of festering revenge. "You took everything from me," he screamed. "You took everything from yourself." Sarah wrenched the rifle upward. "Thomas could have lived if you hadn't been a coward and a thief." Miguel released the rifle and drew a knife from his belt. The blade came up fast, aimed at Sarah's throat. She dropped the Winchester and caught his wrist. They were locked together now, faces inches apart, the knife trembling between them. "Do it," Miguel hissed. "Kill me. You know you want to." Sarah looked into his eyes, saw the hate, the pain, the scar she'd given him. All the years of his life spent nursing revenge instead of healing, becoming a monster to fight a monster, just like she almost had. "No," Sarah said quietly. She twisted Miguel's wrist. The knife clattered to the floor. Then she drove her knee into his wounded leg, the injury from the earlier firefight. He screamed and went down. Sarah grabbed the Winchester and trained it on him, center mass, easy shot. He was helpless, wounded, no threat. One bullet. End it. Justice for Thomas. For Grace. For Judith. Her finger rested on the trigger. "Promise me you'll find peace, not vengeance. I love you, even if you can't keep that promise. I love you." Sarah's hand trembled. Tears ran down her face. "I'm sorry, Tom," she whispered. "I'm so sorry." She lowered the rifle, aimed at Miguel's other leg, fired. The bullet shattered his kneecap. Miguel screamed and collapsed. The wound would immobilize him completely. He wasn't going anywhere. But he'd live. Live to face trial, live to hang legally, live long enough for justice, not vengeance. Sarah dropped the Winchester and sat down hard, her back against the altar. The chapel was silent except for Miguel's gasping breaths and the distant sound of women crying in the sacristy. "You're weak," Miguel spat through his pain. "You could have ended this. You chose weakness." Sarah looked at him, at the broken man who'd spent 15 years nurturing hate, who'd killed and enslaved and destroyed because he couldn't let go of a scar. "Maybe," she said softly, "but I'm free, and you'll never be." The sunrise painted the mission walls red and gold. Sarah sat in the courtyard tending to Sister Teresa's infected leg with supplies she'd found in the Comancheros packs. The wound was bad days old fevered, but with proper care it would heal. Sister Anne appeared beside her, freed from the sacristy. The Irish nun's hands were still shaking, but her eyes were clear. "Sister Sarah," she said, then corrected herself. "Sarah." "It's all right." Sarah tied off the bandage. "I don't know what I am anymore. You're the woman who saved us." Sister Maria emerged with Sister Catherine supporting each other. "God sent you." Sarah's laugh was bitter. "God didn't send me, Maria. Revenge did. I just chose to stop halfway." "That's the miracle," Sister Catherine said softly. Her French accent made the words sound like a prayer. "Choosing to stop. Choosing mercy when vengeance was easier." They helped Sarah free the last of Miguel's wounded men and secure them. Carlos was long gone, fled south, just as Sarah had told him. Good. Maybe he'd make something better of his life. The butcher's bill was grim. 2 dead Ramon and Esteban. 5 wounded, including Miguel. Diego was bleeding out despite Sarah's attempts to save him. He died at dawn with Sister Maria holding his hand praying in Spanish. 3 dead, Sarah said, because of me. "And 3 dead who chose their path," Sister Anne replied, "and 4 women alive who wouldn't be if you hadn't come." Sarah had no answer for that. They waited in the mission for 3 days. Sarah had sent Carlos's horse south with a message tied to the saddle, directions to the mission, a request for help. She didn't know if it would reach anyone, didn't know if rescue would come. But on the morning of the 3rd day, they heard hoofbeats. Sheriff Coleman appeared at the gate leading a posse of 10 men and a medical wagon. His face registered shock when he saw Sarah standing there bloodied and exhausted, but alive. "Sister Sarah," he said, "we heard gunfire, thought we'd find bodies." "You did." Sarah gestured to the courtyard. 3 dead, 5 wounded, 6 survivors. Coleman dismounted and surveyed the scene. His eyes lingered on Miguel, bound and splinted, his face twisted with pain and hate. "Miguel Vega," the sheriff breathed. "We've been hunting him for 15 years. Well, Sarah said tiredly, now you've got him. He'll hang for murder. Sister Judith, Sister Grace, Paulo the driver, and Thomas McClintock, if that counts for anything. It counts for everything, ma'am. Coleman's voice was gentle. What happened here? Sarah looked at her hands, still stained with blood despite washing, still marked by the deaths of 3 men and the wounding of 5 more. Justice, she said finally, and mercy, in that order. 2 weeks later, the wagon rolled through the gates of St. Catherine Convent. Mother Superior stood waiting, her old face unreadable. Behind her, the surviving nuns of El Paso gathered the women who'd prayed for 2 weeks straight, hoping for a miracle. The wagon stopped. Sister Maria climbed down first, then Sister Anne. Sister Catherine helped Sister Teresa, whose leg was still healing. They were gaunt, traumatized, marked by what they'd seen, but alive. Sarah was last. She moved slowly, her own wounds still fresh. The long ride from the mission had opened some of them. Blood seeped through her bandages. Mother Superior approached. For a long moment, they simply looked at each other. You brought them home, the old woman said finally. Not all of them. Sarah's voice broke. Sister Judith, Sister Grace, I couldn't save them, Mother. I tried, but You saved 4 against 8 armed men for 2 weeks. Mother Superior's hand touched Sarah's cheek. You did what you could. With violence, yes, but also with mercy. I killed 3 men, wounded 5 more. I broke my vows, every single one of them. Did you kill Miguel Vega? Sarah blinked. No, I spared him. He'll hang legally for his crimes. Why did you spare him? The question hung in the desert air. Sarah looked at the chapel where the Winchester hung on the wall, at the nuns gathering around their returned sisters, at her own bloody hands. Because, she said slowly, killing him would have been easy. Mercy was harder. And I needed to prove to myself, to God, to Thomas, that I could choose the harder path. Mother Superior nodded. Then you haven't broken your vows, Sarah. You've fulfilled them. You protected the helpless. You pursued justice, and you showed mercy to your enemy. That's not failure. That's faith. But the blood will wash away in time. The old woman's eyes were kind. Day, Sarah, teach us what you've learned. Teach us to be strong and merciful. Sarah looked at the convent, at the life she'd built here, at the peace she'd thought she'd found. I don't know if I can, she whispered. Then have faith. Sarah stayed. She returned the Winchester to the chapel wall, mounted with honor, this time instead of shame. She knelt at the altar and prayed until her knees ached. She tended to Sister Teresa's leg until it healed properly. She held Sister Maria when the nightmares came. She taught Sister Anne to shoot not for revenge, but for defense. When do I know it's right to shoot? Anne asked during their first lesson. Sarah looked at the rifle in her hands, at the weapon she'd sworn never to touch, at the tool that had saved 4 lives and taken 3. When there's no other choice, she said, and even then pray first. Pray during, pray after. Every single time. Miguel Vega hanged in El Paso 3 weeks after his capture. Sarah didn't attend. She spent that day in the chapel praying for his soul and for all the men she'd killed, the 5 from 15 years ago, the 3 from this mission. The weight would never fully lift, but she was learning to carry it. Mother Superior found her that evening. It's done, the old woman said. Miguel Vega is dead. Legal justice. Does it change anything? Sarah asked. It changes everything. Thomas is avenged. The nuns are safe. The cycle of violence ends here. Sarah looked at her hands, still scarred, still marked, but clean. Maybe, she said. Maybe. Sister Sarah Brennan lay dying. It was a good death as deaths go, peaceful, surrounded by family. She was 67 years old and had served God faithfully for 29 years. Longer than she'd been married. Longer than she'd been a killer. Catherine sat beside the bed holding her aunt's hand. The young woman was 18, full of fire and idealism, ready to go to Mexico as a missionary. Aunt Sarah, she said, before you go, I need to know. They say that you killed people. Comancheros. Is it true? Sarah's old eyes opened. Even now, faded and clouded, they held the ghost of the woman who'd hunted 8 men through the desert. Yes, she said. Her voice was barely a whisper. 3 men, and I wounded 5 more. But you're a nun. How do you reconcile that? Sarah smiled faintly. By living with it, child. Every day, every prayer, The weight never goes away. You just get stronger at carrying it. Catherine leaned closer. I'm going to Mexico to minister to the poor, but I'm scared. What if I face violence? You will. Sarah's hand tightened on her niece's. The world is full of men like Miguel Vega, men who take what they want and hurt who they must. Then what do I do? Sarah took a shaky breath. Her next words came slowly, weighted with 29 years of contemplation. Remember this, Catherine. Mercy is your first choice, always. But if there's no other choice, if innocence will die, then act decisively and pray. Pray before, pray during, pray after. Will God forgive me? God forgave me. Sarah looked at the crucifix on the wall. Thomas forgave me. I think I'm finally forgiving myself. Are you at peace, Aunt Sarah? The old nun's eyes drifted closed. Outside, the sunset painted the desert red, the same color it had been when Thomas died, when Grace died, when Judith died. The same red that marked every violent day of Sarah's long life. I'm getting there, she whispered. Tom, I kept my promise. Eventually, Catherine stayed with her through the night. When Sarah's breathing finally stopped, it was almost dawn. The same hour she'd ridden out of this convent 30 years ago, hunting 8 men with only vengeance for company. After the funeral, Catherine packed for her journey to Mexico. She found her aunt's old trunk in the storage room, the one Sarah had kept locked for 29 years. Inside, frontier clothes, medical supplies, and a Winchester 1873 old and maintained, though never fired since 1883. Catherine lifted the rifle. Something was carved into the stock. She turned it to the light and read the inscription. Mercy first, violence last. S.B. 1883. Catherine studied the rifle for a long time. Then she carefully packed it in her trunk beneath her Bibles and bandages. The world was full of men like Miguel Vega, and women like Sarah Brennan were needed to stand against them. Not with vengeance, not with hate, with mercy. And when mercy failed, with violence consecrated by prayer. Catherine shouldered her bag and walked toward the mission gate. The desert stretched before her, endless and red. Somewhere ahead, Mexico waited with all its violence and in need. She didn't look back at the convent, didn't look back at the chapel where her aunt had prayed for 29 years, carrying the weight of 3 deaths and the salvation of 4 lives. Sarah had walked this path, had chosen mercy over vengeance, had proved that a killer could find redemption. Now it was Catherine's turn to walk it. The sun rose red over the desert. The wind carried whispers of the dead. And somewhere in the distance, a raven circled and cried. In 1925, Catherine Brennan published a memoir titled The Mercy of Led My Aunt's Testament. The book became a bestseller, introducing the world to Sister Sarah's story. Historians debate the accuracy of some details, but Sarah's Winchester still hangs in St. Catherine Convent, along with a plaque that reads, Sister Sarah Brennan, 1831 to 1898. She taught us that violence can serve grace, but mercy saves the soul. Miguel Vega's grave in El Paso bears no marker. His name is remembered only as a footnote in Sarah's story, the man who learned too late that vengeance is a poison that kills the vessel first. The Misión de Nuestra Señora still stands in the West Texas desert. Tourists sometimes visit, drawn by Catherine's book. They see the bell tower where Sarah was imprisoned, the courtyard where she made her stand, the chapel where she chose mercy over murder. And sometimes in the right light, at the right hour, they say you can still hear prayers on the wind. Not cries for help, not pleas for salvation. Just a woman's voice whispering the same words she spoke for 29 years. Forgive me, Father, for I must sin to save your daughters. And somewhere perhaps Thomas McClintock smiles and says, I forgive you, Sarah. I always have.